Leo, beloved child of the sun, you are not being rejected, you are being redirected, and yes, it's heartbreaking, but also holy. What if I told you that this feeling of being pushed away from your family is not a mistake? What if it's divine intervention? Welcome to Eternal Mindfulness, where messages find you when your soul is ready. If you're watching this, I invite you to pause and recognize that this moment is not random. You didn't stumble here by accident. The universe doesn't work that way. This video is a sacred invitation, a cosmic confirmation, and for many of you a gentle thunderclap of truth. God is pulling you away from your family. Not to harm you. Not to punish you. But to free you. Because where you're going, your light needs more room to breathe. Your voice can no longer be dimmed. Your mission can no longer be delayed. Leo, let me ask you. Have you ever felt like your brilliance made others uncomfortable? Have you ever had to quiet your dreams just to maintain peace at home? Have you ever been labeled as too much, too ambitious, or too different by those who should have been your biggest supporters? If something within you whispered yes, then I encourage you to comment below and confirm this soul alignment by writing, I know this message is for me. I'm ready for the next chapter. You see, what's happening now is not destruction. It's redirection. And that ache you feel? It's not abandonment, it's preparation. God is gently removing you from environments that no longer nurture your soul, because your light, Leo, is too divine to be caged by guilt, obligation, or outdated loyalty. In the teachings of enlightened wisdom, we learn that suffering arises when we cling to what has already served its purpose. And many of you, whether you've realized it or not, have outgrown the roles you were assigned in your family. You were never meant to simply belong, you were born to lead. Here in this space, we honor that. We honor you. I want to take a sacred moment to thank you deeply for being here. Your presence, your time, your energy, every like, every comment, every subscription, it matters. It carries weight. And it brings you deeper into the Eternal Mindfulness Soul family. Your support allows us to continue bringing forward these transformational messages that don't just speak to your mind, they speak to your path. So if you're still with me, Leo, the first invite you to stay. Because the truth that's about to unfold may not only explain everything you've been feeling, it might just change how you see your entire past. Together, we'll explore why you're being separated, what you're being called into, and how this painful shift is the beginning of your personal coronation. Because no, you are not being left behind. You are being chosen, set apart, and prepared for your own kingdom. Now tell me, dear Leo, what was it that pulled you here today? What made your spirit stop and whisper, "This is for me"? Stay close. What the universe is about to reveal is breathtaking. And it's just beginning. Leo, your soul was never designed to stay small. And yet, how many times have you bent yourself into quiet shapes just to keep others comfortable? How often have you felt the inner fire rise, only to swallow it down for the sake of peace? This part of your journey, the separation from your family, is not a punishment, and it is certainly not a rejection. It is the inevitable next step of someone who can no longer dim their brilliance to fit into spaces that refuse to expand. From an astrological lens, Leo is ruled by the sun, the source of light, life, and consciousness. The sun doesn't ask for permission to shine. It simply rises, because that is its nature. In the same way, Your nature as a Leo is to lead, to illuminate, to create warmth for others, but not at the cost of extinguishing your own flame. The sun can never fulfill its purpose by hiding behind clouds of self-doubt, guilt, or inherited limitations. So when God or the greater divine intelligence begins to shift your circumstances, it is because your soul has matured beyond the need for conditional love or confined roles. The emotional weight you've been carrying didn't begin yesterday. It has accumulated over years, in subtle moments, when you held your tongue at the dinner table to avoid conflict, when you downplayed your achievements to protect someone else's insecurities, when you questioned your worth for wanting a life that felt larger than what you were told was possible. These are not signs of selfishness. These are the birth pangs of awakening. You are no longer being called to survive in a story that doesn't honor the fullness of who you are. You are being called to rewrite it entirely. The energy of the Tower in reversed position, which appeared in your reading, mirrors this transition perfectly. When upright, the Tower speaks to sudden collapse, a dramatic unraveling. But reversed, it becomes quieter, more internal, like a structure that slowly crumbles from within because the foundation was never truly solid. It signals the slow but unstoppable unraveling of an identity that was built around compromise. And right beside it, the star. A symbol of hope, healing, and divine restoration. This tells us that while the shedding may be painful, what follows is a new clarity, a return to essence, to purpose, to truth. In teachings passed down through centuries of inner wisdom, it is said that true freedom doesn't come from escape, but from understanding. When you finally see the illusion of safety for what it is, a cage built from the expectations of others, you no longer fear walking away from it. This is not abandonment of your family, this is alignment with your higher path. It's choosing to honor your truth even when it's inconvenient. It's choosing courage over comfort. Leo, you are not here to live a life shaped by guilt. You are here to be an example not of perfection, but of presence. And that presence cannot coexist with emotional suppression. You are being separated so you can remember how to stand tall without apology, how to love without losing yourself, how to give without bleeding. Let yourself grieve what's falling away. But don't confuse pain with loss. What you are losing was never meant to hold you forever. And what is coming, the space, the freedom, the clarity, is not just for your benefit. It is for every life you'll touch when you rise into your rightful role as a leader of light. This is not exile. This is elevation. The question is not why this is happening. The real question is, are you ready to stop asking for permission and start becoming who you truly are? Every Leo is born with a fire that is uniquely their own, but how that fire awakens and when depends on the rhythm of their cosmic clock. In astrology, we understand that no two Leos are ever truly alike. Even within one zodiac sign, the soul's journey takes shape according to subtle nuances in time, numerology, and planetary influence. And in this moment of sacred transition, that truth is more important than ever. Because the way you're being called forward now, away from old family patterns and into a higher identity, is not random. It's deeply personal, deeply timed, and deeply needed. If you were born between July 23rd and 31st, your essence carries the energy of the archetypal Leo, the pure, radiant flame of noble leadership, generosity, and bold emotion. You likely grew up with a heart that beat loudly, one that instinctively wanted to protect, serve, and inspire. But the very intensity of your emotional truth may have frightened those around you. In environments where emotional power is misunderstood, it is often silenced. You may have been labeled too sensitive, too dramatic, too intense. But you were never too much. You were simply too alive for those who had forgotten how to feel. Now, that heart of yours is being called back into its full capacity, not to convince others, but to remind yourself that your depth is your strength, not your flaw. For Leos born from August 1st to 11th, the call comes with a quiet clarity. You are the visionaries, the inner architects of ethical leadership. You feel the tension between what is expected and what is right, and you have always been able to sense when something around you isn't in alignment. In your family system, you may have witnessed constant compromise moments when others avoided truth in favor of comfort. But you couldn't look away. You couldn't play small in a house where no one wanted to admit the roof was leaking. And for that, you may have been misunderstood as rigid, inflexible, or even difficult. But your role has never been to go along with what's easy, it's been to hold the line for what's true. What you're stepping into now is a path that honors that inner compass. And it begins the moment you stop apologizing for your clarity. Now, if you were born between August 12th and 22nd, your path is even more revolutionary. You carry within you the seeds of disruption, not for destruction's sake, but for necessary transformation. You weren't born to follow maps drawn by others. You were born to question them, to tear them up when they no longer point to truth, and to draw new ones with your own hands. You are a system breaker, a pattern shifter, and often, that means you will be pushed out of the very systems you were born into. Your family may never understand why you can't just go with the flow. But the flow they follow was never meant for you. And the space you're entering now will allow your voice and your legacy to emerge without compromise. When viewed through the lens of energy, certain colors and numbers become powerful allies in this passage. Gold and royal purple strengthen your sovereignty, reconnecting you with your purpose when doubt creeps in. Sapphire blue soothes the emotional body and brings mental clarity when familial noise becomes overwhelming. Angel number 111 signals a reset, the first breath of a brand new cycle. And 888 whispers of prosperity and success that can only manifest once you let go of fear and fully step into the unknown. Like the traveler who hears the bell of a distant temple and follows it beyond the village walls, you are being called to something greater than familiarity. And as uncomfortable as it may be, this is where you rediscover your authority, not as dominance, but as alignment. Not as rebellion, but as truth. The deeper invitation here is not to fight your old role, but to outgrow it so completely that you no longer need to explain why you left. You simply become the living proof that expansion is possible. Imagine a lion raised behind golden bars. It is fed, protected, even praised, but only when it behaves. Only when it stays quiet, small, and manageable. And when it roars, when its instinct to express its truth bursts through, it is told to hush, to lower its voice, to not disturb the peace. That lion forgets, over time, that it was never meant to be tamed. It forgets that the roar itself is sacred, not dangerous. But even a caged lion carries within it the memory of the wild. That memory is your truth, Leo, and what's happening now is not loss. It's the beginning of your return. When we speak of separation, we often associate it with endings. But in energetic work, separation is not a cutting off, it is an opening. It's the gentle, undeniable pull away from what no longer resonates with the person you're becoming. In some traditions, the lotus flower is only able to rise through murky waters by detaching from the mud that birthed it. That mud is not bad. In fact, it was necessary. It gave nutrients, held the seed, created the pressure. But the seed was never meant to stay buried. Neither were you. Your family, your past environments, even your previous roles, they served their purpose. They taught you restraint. They helped shape your early values. But now, if you're honest with yourself, you feel it. The walls that once held you are now pressing in. The comfort they once offered now feels like stagnation. And the expectations that were once protective are now suffocating. This is not because you've changed too much. It's because you've finally grown into the fullness of who you are. In astrology, Leo represents sovereignty, not just outward success, but inner authority. To be sovereign means to lead your life from your own center, not from borrowed scripts or inherited guilt. That shift doesn't always come with applause. Often, it begins in silence. In discomfort. In quiet realizations like, I don't belong in this dynamic anymore, or this version of me doesn't fit here. These are not moments of weakness. They are coronations. Internal ones. Sacred ones. Unseen but undeniable. In your work life, this may manifest as a deep urge to move beyond roles that box you in. Environments where your creativity is questioned or where your voice has to go through layers of approval before it's heard are not aligned with your energy anymore. The new path will require courage, yes, but what you create in spaces that honor your voice will not only be more fulfilling, it will be sustainable. You weren't meant to be merely accepted. You were meant to be celebrated. In your relationships, the same truth applies. If your love needs to be diluted in order to be received, it's no longer love, it's self-sacrifice. Your heart is too noble, too radiant, to keep offering pieces of yourself to those who cannot meet you where you are. And the more you honor that, the more the right connections, ones that resonate with your light, will naturally rise to meet you. You never have to dim to deserve. Even in your financial life, the shift is clear. Numerology 888 is a vibration of abundance, but it is also a number of energetic closure. It speaks of the rewards that come only after an emotional completion. The opportunities, income, and wealth you sense on the horizon? They are not found by forcing yourself to stay small. They are unlocked by choosing integrity over attachment. By releasing old loops and saying, with love, I choose myself. This is not rebellion. This is reclamation. You are not walking away from your past, you're walking toward your future. And in doing so, you crown yourself not out of ego, but out of remembrance. You don't need permission to roar, Leo. You just need space. And that's exactly what this separation is giving you. The separation you're experiencing is not an exile, it's a migration. A shift from the familiar into the destined. You are not being abandoned, you are being rerouted toward the people and places that recognize you not as someone to be managed, but as someone to be honored. And this, Leo, is where the idea of a soul family enters the conversation, not as a mystical concept, but as a very real part of your evolution. You see, what you're leaving behind was never meant to hold the full weight of your truth. It simply wasn't designed to. Not every soil can nurture the roots of a tree destined to rise above the forest. When people speak of finding their people, what they're often searching for is resonance, those rare but undeniable moments when you are seen not through a lens of projection, but of understanding. Your soul family is not necessarily linked to you by blood, history, or shared holidays. They are the ones who see your roar as a blessing, not a threat. The ones who recognize the wisdom in your courage, the sacredness in your ambition, and the medicine in your authenticity. These are the individuals who don't ask you to shrink. Instead, they widen their hearts to make space for all of you. Astrologically, the Hierophant and the Chariot appearing together in your tarot spread reflect a unique spiritual crossroad. The Hierophant represents tradition, structure, and the teachings we inherit. The Chariot, in contrast, symbolizes movement, willpower, and a victorious journey forward. When these two archetypes unite, they suggest that you are breaking through limiting traditions, not to rebel against them, but to carry forward a truth that is deeply your own. This isn't about burning bridges. It's about building new ones that can carry the weight of your growth. In ancient teachings, there is a story of a traveler who left his village not because he was unloved, but because he knew he could no longer grow in its boundaries. He wandered through forests and deserts, endured loneliness and uncertainty, until one day he met other strangers at first, but ones who understood without explanation. In their company, he remembered who he was beyond his role in the village. He didn't need to prove himself. He simply became. That story mirrors what you're stepping into now. It's possible, even likely, that once you align with your soul family, those who mirror back the deepest parts of you with reverence, you'll revisit your old family dynamics with new eyes. No longer needing validation, you'll no longer feel the sting of being misunderstood. You'll return not to seek healing from them, but to offer it through your example. Not by changing them, but by embodying the peace that comes from finally belonging to yourself. In that state, you no longer need others to change in order for you to feel free. You are already free. And that's the quiet miracle of this phase. What once felt like loss transforms into liberation. What once felt like a fracture becomes a doorway. The loneliness that may have haunted you begins to dissipate, not because someone else filled the void, but because you remembered your connection to something far greater, a collective of souls who see you not for who you've been told to be, but for who you actually are. So if your path feels unfamiliar now, if the people around you no longer reflect your truth, trust that you're not lost, you're re-arriving. You're not being punished, you're being positioned. Your soul family is not behind you, they are up ahead, waiting to meet you at the intersection of purpose and presence. And the only thing they ask is that you bring your full self. No shrinking. No explaining. Just truth. Just light. Just you. When you're moving through a phase of energetic separation, especially one as personal and deeply rooted as family, your emotional and physical body will begin to speak more loudly. Often, it doesn't shout with words but with sensations, cravings, tension, and fatigue. And for Leo, whose life force radiates directly from the heart center, this period of transition requires a special kind of care. The chest, the lungs, the ribcage, the very area that holds your roar, all of it becomes both a symbol and a channel of everything you're carrying. If you felt heaviness in your chest lately, if your breath feels shallow or your emotions sit like a knot behind your sternum, you are not alone. These are not just symptoms of stress. They are signs that your inner space is ready to be cleared and reclaimed. In astrology, Leo is governed by the sun, life-giving, powerful, radiant. But even the sun must rest behind the clouds sometimes. This phase of emotional and spiritual reset is your version of a cloudy day. Not because your light has gone out, but because it's being refined. And in this refinement, self-care is no longer a luxury, it's a sacred responsibility. Emotional care begins with presence. 10 minutes a day of intentional stillness, whether through breathwork, sound meditation, or gentle self-reflection, can soften the noise of external expectation. Frequencies like 396 Hz can help dissolve shame and emotional residue, gently clearing away the remnants of feeling like not enough, or the lingering pain of feeling misunderstood by those closest to you. This is not about escaping your feelings, it's about witnessing them with compassion. The simple act of journaling each day with a prompt such as, "I am not being left behind, I am being led forward," or "I was separated not to be alone, but to be free," opens a doorway into your nervous system. It creates a pause between reaction and truth. This is the kind of emotional training that sustains true growth. In teachings on suffering and attachment, it is said that the root of most inner conflict is not the experience itself, but our resistance to it. By allowing the pain to be acknowledged, and by creating gentle rituals around that acknowledgement, we soften its grip on our mind and body. Nutrition plays a larger role in energetic clarity than most people realize. Magnesium and B vitamins are essential allies during high-stress transitions. They support the nervous system, regulate energy, and help recalibrate your body's internal rhythms after prolonged emotional output. In contrast, stimulants like excessive caffeine or overly spicy foods may amplify erratic energy or cause emotional spikes that leave you feeling drained or overly reactive. During separation, your system needs consistency, not chaos. Hydrating deeply, eating warm, grounding meals, and listening to what your body truly craves is part of building the foundation from which your new self can emerge. Movement is medicine, especially when it's intentional. You don't need intensity, you need connection. Practicing sun salutations or heart-opening postures like lion's breath or camel pose can create space in the chest, release pent-up tension, and restore energetic flow to the very center of your Leo power. These movements are not about performance, they're about restoration. They teach your body what your soul is learning, that release is strength, not weakness. There's a phrase that reminds us, you cannot pour from an empty cup. But deeper than that, you cannot radiate from a blocked heart. And Leo, your gift to the world is that radiant center, the fearless heart, the warm presence, the powerful authenticity. Taking care of that light is not selfish. It's an act of service. As you walk this path of separation and self-reclamation, remember that the more gently you treat your body and emotions now, the more clearly your future self will shine through. You're not just healing for yourself. You're preparing to lead again, stronger, softer, and more whole. Leo, dear one, if you've made it this far, take a deep breath and allow yourself to receive this fully. What you are experiencing is not the end of something you needed, but the beginning of everything you were always meant for. The path you're walking may feel unfamiliar. It may stir emotions that are difficult to name, let alone process. But you are not walking it because you've failed, or because you're not loved. You're walking it because your soul is finally ready to live as it was designed, unapologetically, fully, and free. You see, not everyone is chosen to lead. Not everyone is called to rise first. But you were. And that call doesn't come when things are comfortable. It comes when something inside you whispers, I can't do this the old way anymore. It comes when love without conditions becomes more important than acceptance with limitations. It comes when your heart says, even if I have to walk alone for a while, I will not abandon myself. And that, Leo, is the sacred threshold you're crossing right now. Everything you've felt, the misalignment, the aching, the courage it's taken just to keep going, is evidence that something greater is unfolding through you. And if you choose to honor that, to really listen to it, you'll see that this separation is not just about what you're walking away from. It's about what you're walking toward. A life where you don't need to shrink to be safe. A space where your fire is not too much. A future where you are allowed to be everything you are without explaining yourself. So I ask you gently, but with deep sincerity, what part of yourself are you ready to stop hiding? What dream have you been putting off because you feared it wouldn't be accepted by those who loved the older version of you? And most importantly, are you ready to trust that your next chapter does not require the approval of your past? You were never here to blend in. You were born to blaze trails. To disrupt patterns. To embody heart-centered power. And now that you know what no longer fits, you have a choice. Will you dim your light again for the sake of familiarity? Or will you rise, fully, even if it means becoming the light that others must adjust to? I hope you choose the second. I hope you choose yourself. And if something in this message resonated with you, if you felt seen, heard, or even slightly more understood, then take a moment to claim it. Leave a comment below with the words, I accept my crown. Not just for me, but for yourself. For every version of you that has been waiting for this permission. I want to thank you from the deepest part of my heart for spending this time with me. Every like, every comment, every subscription to Eternal Mindfulness isn't just a gesture, it's a signal that you're not just consuming this message, you're embodying it. Your presence here allows these messages to reach others who, like you, are standing at the edge of their own awakening. Your light ripples outward more than you realize. So please, if you feel called, share this video with someone who might need a reminder that they, too, are being guided, not abandoned. And subscribe if you'd like to keep walking this journey with me. Because this is just the beginning. And Leo, the crown was never outside of you. It was always waiting within. Now tell me, what's one truth about yourself that you're ready to honor from this day forward? I'd love to hear it in the comments. Let's keep shining together.